Cheap Eats is filmed under poverty conditions with a live studio audience dubbed in after the fact.
Today is a very exciting day for me because I just found out that I got a full-time position at the place where I work. To celebrate, I'm going to be bringing in a cake to work tomorrow. This is my signature cake, raspberry spice cake. I've talked about it before, and now I'm actually going to show you guys how to make it. Typically, when you deal with cakes, you build them from scratch or do a brand cake mix. And that's the version that I'm going to be using today. So if you prefer to do it from scratch, you're going to need to get your cake mix together like I don't know how to do before you pick this up. The secret to getting a good cake mix is to get Duncan Hines on sale. Yes! Duncan Hines Spice Cake Mix is going to be the first thing that you need. You will also need applesauce. I'm almost out, but I have just enough for this. And you're going to need eggs. Hey, what do you know? I actually showed you that and it wasn't upside down. Eggs! You will need 3 of those. And you will also need raspberries. I was going to make this cake today anyway, and then at the end of the day I went up to the front counter and someone had brought in a bunch of quarts of raspberries. It was epic. You will also need a measuring cup, a mixing bowl, a spoon. You will also need a cake pan, since that is generally what cakes go in. And to prepare that, you will also need flour, shortening, and paper towels. And lastly, you will need a small bowl and a strainer-ish thing for the raspberries, but that part actually comes quite near the end, so we won't worry about that right now. Put shortening all over your cake pan. This is a general rule for cakes. And then powder flour all over it. That prevents the cake from sticking once it bakes. You're going to take the entire baking mix. You're going to dump it in. You need 1 1/3 cups of water. Put that in. Start to stir. 1/3 cup of applesauce. Now, this is an alternative for oil. It lowers the fat on the recipe, but the trick is it has to be unsweetened applesauce. So we're talking homemade or, you know, like Mott's unsweetened or whatever. And also 3 eggs, which I can't crack while I'm recording. Back when I made the banana cream pie, I told you 2 things about eggs, and they still hold true. First of all, it's easier to mix them in with everything if you beat them together beforehand. And secondly, save your eggshells for your friendly neighborhood farmer, because if you feed them to chickens, the eggshells, not the farmers, the chickens will then lay stronger eggs. At this point, if you haven't done so, step over to your oven and start to preheat it to generally 350 degrees Fahrenheit. That's for your normal metal and glass pans. But if you're using a dark pan, do 325 instead. And then step back over here, mix the applesauce and the eggs into your water cake mix. You need to rinse off your raspberries, but that won't take very long. Safe preparation for fruits and stuff like that is that you rinse them off if you get them fresh. In the meantime, you're going to go ahead and put the entire cake mix into your cake pan. If your cake doesn't accomplish evenly across all 4 corners, then all you have to do is pick up the pan and shift it around so that the cake batter actually falls in all the corners and sides and stuff evenly. Then comes the first bit of fun with the raspberries. All you have to do is take a couple and chuck them in. It's great good fun. However, don't overload the batter yet. There's several places in the recipe where you use raspberries. One is right here just before it goes in, and those raspberries need to be whole, with the exception of that gooey one that I just threw in. Go ahead, set your cake on a middle rack. Set your timer for about 33 minutes. But you don't get to take a break now, because now it's time to prepare the rest of the raspberries. The raspberries serve a couple other purposes for this recipe. First of all, we're going to mix some of the raspberries into our cream cheese frosting. We're actually going to stick it in the microwave, and yes, frosting is microwavable. Secondly, we're going to mush some of the raspberries, drain them of their juice, and that's going to go into the measuring cup, but we're also going to use the pulp left over from the juiced raspberries. And both of those parts are going to go on top of the cake when it's all done. Rinse out your measuring cup because you're going to need it. So why do we need the bowl? Well, it's because for the amount of raspberries we're using, they aren't all going to fit in that strainer. Pulping it will condense the berries and release the juice so that it's easy to drain it into the measuring cup. You can use this recipe with probably any other berry, but I have an obsession with raspberries. Your ultimate goal is to make all of the berries, oh look, I missed one, indistinguishable. Like you can't tell what was part of one raspberry and what was part of another. Now for the fun part, and I can't hold the camera during this. We're going to start to pour, preferably without making a mess, but we all know I can't actually do that. Pour the berry pulp mix into the strainer. About a half cup of raspberry juice is all you actually need. So once that's done, you're on break until your timer goes off, because then you'll need the microwave again. Now obviously that's got to cool before we do anything, including frosting it, but the way that we treat the frosting helps to speed up that process. What's important is that you take off the tin lid and then barely replace the cover and only stick it in the microwave on power 5 for 30 seconds. Then we have the leftover pulp from what we were doing before. You want to make sure some of the juice gets in there and some of the pulp. There we go. And then you're going to stir it in. Obviously be careful. With the heat, it's very easy to move this frosting around. Once the cake is cooled, it's time for the frosting. It'll still be a little bit thick, but it'll be thin enough and easy enough to spread. Once the cake is completely frosted, we're going to flash freeze it for about 10 minutes. With the cake out of the freezer, there are now 2 steps to completing the cake itself. Number 1, raspberry juice. Remember that stuff? Okay, basically what you're going to do, and this is why you wanted a spout, you're going to carefully drizzle it. And you notice, yes, it's running all over the place. That's okay. The other part is our clump stuff. Since I couldn't actually do that while I was holding the camera, basically what I did was I took that seed pulp and put little flower buds, I guess you'd call them, 1 in each corner, and then 2 in the middle here. Basically at this point, you're done.